What's going on, everybody? Glenn P. Brooks Jr. here, author, speaker, coach, and today we're going to be talking about blending families, but more importantly, how do you make the co-parenting thing work? I'm super excited. Right here next to me is the lovely light skin with the red lipstick happening.
Sheri Brooks Jr. I'm also an author, speaker, relationship, and life balance coach, and I want to welcome you guys to Breakfast with the Brooks. Thank you guys for subscribing to our YouTube channel. For those of you, if this is your first time, please make sure you subscribe and make sure you ring the bell so that you get notifications when we go live. Now, normally we are coming to you live, but this week we're actually not because we're actually on a cruise with our co-parents. We're on the My Family Rocks Cruise 2019 Grown Edition with our co-parents.
And guys, let me say this. She did not, that wasn't a faux pas. That was not a Freudian slip. She said we're on our cruise with our co-parents.
Yes.
And let me tell you the beauty of that, Sheri. I know that you and I, 20 years ago, when we set out on this journey to blend a family, we got married 20 years ago. It was on the heels of obviously failed marriages.
Right.
And so I was married for 12 years before you. You were married twice before me. And we could not make those previous marriages work. How is it that now not only are we making ours work, but we're able to blend a family and have a super solid relationship with our co-parents?
Well, it's been a journey. It didn't start out this way. Even I'll backtrack, as Glenn said, I had been married twice before. I actually never really had a co-parenting relationship with my daughter's biological father. We kind of went our separate ways, and I never really dealt with the co-parenting thing because he went on and lived his life, and I raised her as a single parent for the most part. So I never knew what that looked like until you and I got together. And I was one of these women that had the idea, which is weird because even though I had a child, I didn't want to deal with anybody with a child because I didn't want to deal with baby's mama drama.
Right.
I didn't want to deal with that stuff. And so I had this negative connotation of that. And so I had always said I was never going to deal with anybody that had a child. But then I met you and you had Justin and, we hit it off. We were friends at first.
Yeah.
And when we finally did start dating and we eventually got married, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to embrace this whole concept here and figure out how does this work. And thankfully, there was no baby mama drama from the traditional sense. We had to get to know each other. We had to build a relationship. And that was a little challenging in the beginning, especially for me.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't come from that. I had never experienced that. And I didn't even know how to approach that. And I think my own insecurities played a big part in that in the beginning because I just couldn't understand why she would even want to still be involved, I guess, in a sense, even though y'all had a child together, which doesn't make sense now when I think about it, but it was challenging.
Now, I remember, guys, and let me just say this on the front end. I know for a fact that everybody's situation is different.
Yes.
And I know that, everybody does not have, nor do they want to have a solid relationship with their co-parent. But for us, it was super important. I think earlier on, we both recognized that our children were valuable to us. And in the sense that because we had messed it up before, we didn't want to give our children, we wanted to give them a shot. We wanted to give them a shot of what healthy relationships look like. And I think that unfortunately what parents forget is that they're watching, right?
Yes.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about some tenets when it comes to co-parenting, what makes it work, how do you begin to approach it. The truth of the matter is that it does take two. And that's why, the long name of co-parenting is cooperative parenting, right?
Right. Both have to be willing to cooperate in the process.
And so let's take it back to the beginning. And we talk about you not really being on board at first with the whole cooperating with, at the time, still my ex-wife. And I remember distinctly you sort of feeling some type of way that I even had a desire to be engaged in their life. Now, my son's life, yes.
Right.
But their life as it related to my son. It was clear that she and I were done. That was clear. It wasn't like you had these insecurities like, does he want her? Does she? But you didn't know her.
Right.
So you weren't sure if she wants me. That kind
right.
And y'all see the laugh because I know that was real.
Right. I mean, and like I said, it was steeped in my insecurities because I had never been in a relationship with somebody that had a child and had to deal with that. I didn't know what that looked like. And so for me, she was trying to be extremely functional. She was trying to be involved. She was trying to, communicate with you.
Yeah.
She wanted you to be involved in his life more than just on the weekends.
Exactly.
And for me, it seemed like in the beginning that, her trying to pull you in was her trying to pull you in. And I didn't realize that it was for the sake of him solely initially.
Right.
I mean, I'm being honest. I'm being completely transparent. And so I didn't know. Like he said, I didn't know her in the beginning. So I'm like, okay, is she trying to pull him back in? Is she trying to get back with him? All of that. And so, I had my insecurities. And then also it didn't help because I hadn't been through that before.
Right.
I had no frame of reference. And so for me, it's like, okay, in my situation, I never got child support. I never got support at all. I did it on my own. I didn't, we didn't have any relationship at all. And the only time we did have communication was because he was trying to get back with me.
Right.
And so that was my only frame of reference. And so you had shown me before we got really involved in a relationship that you were involved in your son's life. You would have him on the weekends.
And this is when we were friends.
Right.
You got to see me interact with him.
Right. You would go
because of the concern. I mean, the kind of situation when we became friends. We were working with a youth organization, and so we got to know each other from a distance, in a sense.
Right.
And so you got to watch me bring him to to our events and things like that. And so you saw, okay, this guy's really engaged with his son.
And the more we became friends, I got to learn. Like you would go when he had things going on at school. You would go to that, and then I remember the first Christmas when we were friends.
Oh my God, not the Christmas story. Guys, listen, if you're just joining us, listen to me carefully. We're going in a little bit on, and we're setting it up because we're going to be doing a series of talks. Right now, Sheri and I are on a cruise out in the middle of somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, I'm sure, at the time you guys are seeing this, and we're having a ball, but we're hanging out with our co-parents, and we're going to probably record some content and some different things with our conversations. But most importantly, we really want to begin a series that kind of talks about how does it look to build a solid relationship with your co-parent? How does it look to build a solid relationship as you're blending a family? And we did it. It's been 20 years, and I can't believe it. People always look at the famous people who are doing this, but
they're not the only ones.
They're not the only ones, and I that's not to throw shade. But it is to say that
it's possible.
It's possible, but people normally don't tell that. They don't share that. And the reason why we're sharing this is because we want you to know how it's possible. So I want to go back to the Christmas story. Y'all got to hear this because this was probably the beginning of you accepting, look, this is going to go down. And, you may want to. You may want to participate. And I said the very beginning. Look, this is getting ready to get interesting. Come on.
Right. So the first Christmas came along. We were friends. We weren't dating. We were just friends. And he's telling me, he was like, yeah, I'm going over to my ex's. This is on Christmas Eve to go be there for my son. So I'll be there when he wakes up on Christmas morning. And I'm like, when he wakes up Christmas morning?
Now, you have to understand.
What? So
we're friends, but we're getting really close.
Right. I'm like, so you're going Christmas Eve night. So you're there
right. So why don't you just go like super early in the morning?
Where's she gonna be? Is she home?
Right. So is this a spending the night?
So you're doing a sleepover.
Y'all having a slumber party?
You're having a sleepover. Christmas Eve night, so you can be there for Christmas morning. I'm like, okay, this is different.
Right. Right.
So
I remember that like it was yesterday.
And I was like, so why couldn't you just go in the morning? Why?
Right.
And he's like, well, I mean, I just want to be there. I was like, well, for me as a woman, I'm thinking if you're coming, that's sending me mixed signals.
Yeah.
I would think that that's sending me mixed signals. If you're going to come and you're going to spend the night, and not that we're sleeping together, you could sleep on the couch, whatever, but the fact that you're coming, that would be confusing to me if I'm your ex.
Right.
That you're coming and spending the night.
Right.
At the house.
And I think
and also,
go ahead.
That's extremely confusing for the child. Because what signal are you sending the child?
Right.
That, because at that phase, he's very young. He's still trying to figure out mommy and daddy not together. And then you like, okay, they are together. But then
he probably was 2 years
right.
old.
And so I'm like, that's confusing for him.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you initially didn't understand
That mindset.
That mindset, yeah.
See, because guys, and let me just back it up and kind of give you guys some context. So for Deirdre and I, my ex-wife, you have to understand just a little bit of background. So we've known each other since we were kids. Mm-hmm. Our parents have known each other since they were kids. So there is a long history of a relationship on some level. Now, don't get me wrong. We didn't grow up in the same neighborhood. It wasn't like we went to the same church. We didn't see each other throughout our growth, our childhood.
Yeah, they didn't go to school together.
We didn't go to school together. So it's not like we saw each other every day. I mean, we may, in all of our childhood, saw each other a couple of times a year, maybe. There would be years that would go by and we didn't see each other. Our families didn't get together. So although our families knew one another, and quite frankly, her mother and my grandmother are best friends and they are super close. So obviously their children were close when they were kids, and then their children's children, which was us, kind of began to gravitate. It wasn't like this was my best friend or we lived next door to each other like that. However, there was a history. Mm-hmm. So for me, after the relationship had broken and we were clearly done, mm-hmm. I had done some things that I am not proud to say. She had done some things that she just had no idea that this tornado of a person was coming into her life. And so how she reacted and responded was something foreign to her. I felt obligated to my son to do the right thing. I felt obligated to be there. And like you said, I had never seen this done before.
Right.
All I knew is that I wanted to be there for Christmas when my son woke up. And to me, it was plausible to think that I could stay the night. It was going to be platonic because at this point, that's dead. That there's nothing there, right? I mean, it had been that way for years. And so I understand what Sheri is saying, because from a female's perspective, is that sending messages? And herein lies the rub. One of the things I want to talk to you about, and we're talking about how do you build a bridge with your co-parent. You're going to have to become really good at communicating.
Right.
I mean, really, really good. So if there's a number one you can put in the chat, number one, put this in the chat, become a great communicator. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the biggest things that I think, quite frankly, served to make our foundation super solid.
Right. Between
you and I, and then ultimately between the whole co-parenting, even later on, once it got to the place to where our daughter's biological father started kind of wanting in her life, mm-hmm. there was a high level of communication going on, mm-hmm. so it offset the dumb stuff.
Right.
And so what I want you guys to understand is that Sheri and I were able to bridge a gap that caused us to offset dumb stuff. Now, it was tough. Don't get me wrong. So trying to communicate to you like, yo, I just want to go over there. And I remember that conversation vividly. I'm trying to, the more I'm explaining, the dumber it sounds, right? The dumber the idea sounds, because I'm starting to now understand your perspective of what this could look like for a woman.
Right, right. And like I said, I didn't know her, so I'm not saying that that's what she was thinking, but I'm like, as a woman, I would think that would be a little confusing, and especially for the child.
Yeah.
And because I was a single parent and I had gone through, some dealings with my daughter's father, one of my biggest things was like, I did not want to give her mixed signals.
Yeah.
And that I realized that children were very impressionable, and that children ultimately, they want their parents together.
Yeah. At the end of the day.
At the end of the day, they want their parents together. So when you guys split up, you have to realize, number one, that it's not just you splitting up. You're splitting up from your children. And so I think that you have to be considerate of that and make sure that you consider that in everything going forward. If your relationship doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But you have to be mindful of how it impacts your children.
Yeah.
And make sure that you try to make that process as seamless and as smooth as possible for them, and transition for them in a way that makes it easier for them. But at the same time, you don't want to give them mixed signals, because children, they take what you do as what's true. So you can tell them one thing, but if you are still acting like, you're one big happy family, like I'll see couples, when they first split up, and when they first split up, they still going on vacation together, they doing all this. That's confusing for the child. I think if there's a split, there needs to be a clear definition of the split, but then there needs to be also, they do still need to see both parents interacting together. And so it's a delicate balance.
Yeah, and
it's a delicate balance.
I want to speak to that because I just heard somebody think, well, that's confusing. Well, what are you saying? That's an oxymoron. You're saying there needs to be a clear demarcation. There needs to be a line drawn of what this is, but at the same time, you need to be together. Let me attempt to clarify something really quickly. When you draw a line, you're creating a boundary that brings clarity to a situation. And so defining what you're trying to do is define what this now is. And again, I got 3 things that I want to share. Number 1, we said you're going to have to become super good at communicating when it comes to your co-parent. Number 2, and we just got finished talking about it. Please hold that thought. I know you're chomping at the bit. You're going to have to keep the kids first.
Yes.
So the kid. Everything you do is about them at this point.
Right. It's not about you anymore.
It's not about you. And I think that that's what we lose. And so when we even talk about giving clarity to a situation, it's about, listen, we want the kids to understand what this is and what this is not.
Right. So the example that came to my mind is that a couple decides they're going to split up. They're not going to be together, but they're going to live in the same home together. But y'all separated.
They were married before? Is that what
they were married.
Okay.
They decide we don't want to be together no more, but because of financial reasons, whatever, we're going to still be in the same house.
Okay.
Imagine children in the midst of that. How confusing would that be for the children? Because in their eyes, what they're seeing is mommy and daddy are still together. Mm-hmm. But mommy and daddy aren't still together. Mm-hmm. So let alone the level of tension that's going to be going on in the house.
Because of the
dynamics of the relationship. When one of them does decide they're going to start seeing somebody else or whatever, how do you then explain that to your children when you guys have been living in the same house together? And so that's what I'm saying. It's a very fine line. And so you have to ensure that the children understand what's going on as it's age appropriate. You explain it to them in a way that they can understand it depending on what age they are. But then also they do need to see their parents interact together in a friendly manner. And that's what I mean by when you come together. That means, when there is the exchange of children, when you're picking them up or dropping them off, whatever, that you guys are civil towards one each other. You don't want them to see that, there's this anger or this bitterness or this resentment, because you don't want them to feel like they have to choose to love one over the other. And that's one thing that often happens in families when they're broken, is that children feel like they have to choose one parent over the other, and you want to try to avoid that. And so at the end of the day, even though your marriage may have ended, your relationship may have ended, that's still the mother of your children.
Right.
That's still the father of your children. And so there's a certain level of respect and love you should have for them, as far as them being that person that helped to give you the greatest gift you can ever have.
Exactly.
Which is your child, and you have to demonstrate that.
Exactly. So what I want you guys to understand, guys, listen to me very carefully. And I want y'all to look at us. Look at us. I want to look at your eyes. Let me ask you a question. You are a co-parent. Who is this about, you or your children?
It's about me.
I want you to think about it, Sheri. Let them think. Who is this about, you or your children?
Right.
Your relationship is dead.
Right.
It's not coming back. Mm-hmm. It didn't end the way you wanted it to. Mm-hmm. You're hurt, you're bothered, you're disconnected, you're pissed, you're angry. It's not fair.
Right.
Who is this about?
Right.
I want you guys to picture in your mind, really, who is this about? Because at the end of the day, if you do not get that priority straight, here is what I am going to promise you is going to happen. You are going to severely damage the people that you care most about, because now you've taken their concern, and it's going to lead us to number 3, off the table, and you've made it about you.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right. And I think, and I talked about this earlier, I think the thing we have to remember is that when you get a divorce, when you separate, you're not the only one to separate in. And I think that we forget that. We just think, my relationship has ended. When your relationship ends, you're damaging their relationship with that other parent. You're now creating a divide in their relationship with that other parent. But their relationship they haven't broken up with their parent.
That's good.
They haven't quit their parent.
Right. They're not
and
divorcing.
So they're
their
not
parent.
divorcing their parent. And often what happens is when we divorce, when we split up, we break it all. You know, everything's gone, and you forget they still have a relationship with this child or a relationship with this parent, and it's not fair for you to stop that relationship, and you have to consider that relationship.
Yeah.
And it can be difficult, especially if the relationship was really volatile, if things got really ugly. It can be hard. It can be very difficult because you're hurt, like Glenn said. But there's a way that you can do that so that they can still have their relationship. Their relationship can stay intact, even though yours has ended. And that's where the blending process starts.
So Sheri and I, and before we go to number 3, we wrote a book called From Broken to Family to Blended, the process of building a solid family. And one of the things that I love about this very small book is that it really kind of breaks down the core of blending.
Right.
And I just want to paint a picture for you guys really quickly. You have two people who are flawed as individuals. Mm-hmm. They come together. They're broken. There are things in them that don't work properly. They both come to the table with baggage, drama, issues. Some of them dealt with, some of them not. Some of them resolved completely. Some of them they're just discovering. Those two people decide that they like each other a whole lot. They begin to move closer toward building a relationship together. And then all of a sudden, they decided, you know what? You're the one.
Right.
You're the one I want to be with. And so as a result of that, you either A, get married. Some of you guys have moved in together. Some of you guys are in long-term dating relationships.
Right.
But the bottom line is that you've created a bond between the two of you that now says to yourselves and to the world that we're family.
Right.
What happens when you do not blend at that point? Mm-hmm. What happens when you don't deal with the brokenness? What happens then when you don't deal with the damaged parts that later are affecting the children and the children's children and everybody, everything that you're connected to?
Right.
What happens is that you never become blended. And I honestly believe, we believe that blending is ongoing.
Right.
So as a co-parent, my job, even though our child biologically, Deidre and I's child is a grown man. Mm-hmm. He's 26. He'll be 26 years old this year. Sheri met him when he was 3. Mm-hmm. So all of his life, he has watched us blend with him.
Right.
And so number 1, we said you have to get very good at communicating. Number 2, it has to become about the kids. And number 3, guys, you have to care.
Right.
I want you to put that in the chat. Number 3 is you have to care. Right. And when I say care, Sheri, I'm really talking about caring enough about the child to put them first and make them the priority, so that now you find yourself loving your child more than you hate your ex.
That's good. That's good. Right. I think you have to put your feelings, your emotions off the table and consider your child.
Yep.
And put them first and care about what their needs are, care about what they need and not so much you. Because at this point, the relationship is dissolved. It's not about you and this person anymore, but caring enough about your child to ensure that their needs are met.
Yep.
I'm a firm believer that every child needs their father. They need a father figure in their life, and if it's at all possible for their biological father to be involved, I think it's your duty to do what you can to try to make that happen. Now, you can't make a person be involved. I'm not talking about that. You can't make a person be there if they don't want to or if they, aren't able to. But if they want to, if they want to be involved, I think that you have to let go of your own bitterness, let go of your own feelings, and do what you can to care for your child to ensure that their needs are met. And even in caring, I think there's a part that, and I'll go back to this, as the biological parent, the other person that helped to create this child, there's a level of care you should have for that person regardless of what you guys have been through.
Yeah.
One thing that I consistently would tell my daughter's biological father is that I thank him every Father's Day for giving me the greatest gift I ever got.
Yeah.
Because if it weren't for him, I would not have her.
Yeah.
Our relationship ended. We went through our stuff. But I appreciate him for being in my life in that time.
Yeah.
Because if it weren't for him, I wouldn't have my daughter. And
Yeah.
so there's a level of care that I demonstrate towards him, a level of concern, even, and it wasn't easy in the beginning. Like I said, we went through our stuff where he wasn't there for a number of years. But as we've both grown and, as she's grown, I realized the importance of that. Now, I didn't get to demonstrate that with her because I didn't have a cooperative parent on the other side to co-parent.
Right.
But
you know what? The work that you did in terms of caring enough for your daughter prior to meeting me for those 11 years or so, what I think you did was build the foundation that when I did come along, that the transition for Shantae, I think, was easier than it could have been had you been this bitter, cantankerous, on get back, vindictive, nasty, pawn playing chess player, right, of a parent that decided to move her and shift her at will because you did not care.
Right.
You cared enough to be able to step up, do what needed to be done as a mom, but also never block the opportunity for her biological father to be involved. Nor did you lie for him, nor did you make excuses for him, which I think built a level of truth in y'all's relationship, meaning you and your daughter, so that when I show up, I think my job was a lot easier than it could have been.
Right.
My job as a new father, if you will, or a father figure, was now to bridge a gap. Because I recognize, guys, listen to me very carefully. We're still talking about blending. We're still talking about how to build a solid relationship with your co-parent, how to, with great awareness, approach that subject so that the child's best interest is held in high regard, right? And I think it starts with you. I think it starts with you deciding that I wasn't a great communicator when this person and I were together.
Right.
Clearly, because if you were, you probably wouldn't have come to the place of not being together, right? Because you could have worked through that.
Right.
However, you decide now I need to be a better communicator. Maybe I'm more mature. Maybe I see things a little bit differently. That's going to be critical. Number two, if I don't put this child's needs before mine, they're going to be left with the short end of the stick every time, because you've made this personal, right?
Right.
And then this last piece, when we're talking about caring, I want you to view your co-parent as your child's parent.
Right.
I want you to stop viewing them as your ex.
Yep.
Why are you laughing, babe?
Because that's so true. It's like when you look at them as they're your child's parent and not your ex, it just changes your perspective completely, because now your focus is on the child. It's not on you. You don't make it about you, because as long as you're considering them, this is my ex. I don't want to have to deal with my ex. You're not going to deal with them. You're going to be mean. You're going to be bitter. You're going to, all that is going to come with that. But if you're thinking about, this is my child's parent, let me talk to you. Let me talk to your dad. Let me talk to your mom. Let me work this out for you.
Oh, that's good.
It helps you to change your perspective, and it changes your view.
That's good, babe.
And it makes the blending process much easier.
That's good. Guys, listen, and I need y'all to be super clear. I want y'all first, before we continue on, to consider connecting with us in the MAPS Relationship Academy. I want you to go to www.thecrcoach.com. For those of you guys who are live with us in the chat, somebody do me a huge favor, put that in the chat so that people can get a hyperlink to that particular website. Let me tell you what you want to do when you get there. You want to look for a button that says, schedule a free discovery session, right? And what that's going to do is allow you to schedule about a 15-minute period of time with us, one of us, and we'll be able to talk through, sort of assess where you are. If you are a parent, if you are a co-parent, if you are a grandparent, if you are a foster parent,
right,
you need to be in a community full of people who are doing at a high level what it is that you're interested in doing. And I think the game changed for us when we recognized that our community helped us to bolster these three critical points. And I'm going to give you a bonus in a quick second if you hang tight. But these three critical points were bolstered in community. So when we started talking about communication, I was always a great talker, but I was a horrible listener.
Right.
I just couldn't do that. I learned how to develop my skills on listening in community with other great listeners. Does that make sense?
And it's funny, and I was the opposite. I was a great listener, but I didn't talk.
Not at all. And so thus, you can have a transmission without a reception,
Right.
or you can have a reception without a transmission. And either way, you don't communicate.
Right.
That doesn't equal communication.
Right.
So I want you to consider that. For a bonus, I want you to, it's really going to come more of a question. It's more of a question I want you to consider. As we get ready to wrap this up, we got a pool party to get to. No, I'm just playing. If you just jumping in, we're actually on a cruise. We're not live this week. Rarely do we not go live. And the reason why is because we're hanging out with our co-parents. And I'm looking forward to bringing some conversations and maybe some next steps as we continue this series throughout, some things that maybe some input. They're really private people. And so I don't know if I'll be able to get them on camera. But they are the sweetest folks in the world. They're great friends of ours. Even though this was at one point my ex-wife. I mean, this is at one point my it's my wife. Now my ex-wife. We like to consider them our bonus parents, our friends, and our son has benefited from. Here's the bonus that I want you to put and form as a question. What would it look like if you were not afraid? Question. What would it look like if you were not afraid? I want to put this down as a bonus principle that I need you guys to consider over these next few weeks, because we're going to put together a series of talks. We'll probably be bringing in guests. I don't know. We may get a chance to interview one of our kids. But the point I want you guys to kind of consider, what would it look like when it comes to co-parenting if you were not afraid? What would it look like? And I want you to begin to rhetorically think on that. But we're going to answer that question. What would it look like if you did it and you weren't afraid?
Right.
You stepped into the fear and you did it anyway. At the end of the day, guys, I promise you, in order for you to get to where you need to be, you're going to need some help. You're not going to be able to do this on your own. And I think that that's the biggest thing that sort of benefited us, was that we didn't do this by ourselves.
Right. We had a community. We were lucky enough to be in a community of other couples who had been through what we were going through, that were blending their families and were doing it successfully. So I got to see real live examples of what that looked like as we were going through our journey, and a group of people that were supportive of it. Because a lot of people, I would share with people outside of our community what the situation was, and they, I got a lot of negativity. Well, why you dealing with that? You don't have to do it. That ain't your son.
Right.
Why you doing? And it's like, really, no, he's my son. We're married. I've known him since he was 3 years old. That's my son.
Right.
I didn't give birth to him, but and you have to be very careful when you're trying to blend a family, who you're talking to and who you're getting wisdom from, because the world has a different view of step parenting, and we don't even like using the term step parenting, because to me that means that's saying that it's something outside of. It's a step. It's just not part of.
It's
the whole.
Almost.
Right. It's not the whole.
Exactly.
And I'm a firm believer that even using that terminology, that affects your children mentally, because if they're hearing I'm a stepchild instead of that's
somehow
my child.
Not good enough.
Right, that I'm not my child, that creates a level of separation. Because now it's my child and your child and all that. And I just don't agree with that personally. I think that, if you get married and you get with somebody and they have children and you guys are going to be together, that you embrace their children as your own children.
Now, I want to add this, because I can almost hear people saying, but it's not my child. I didn't give birth to them. They do have a mother. They do have a father. Let me help you guys understand. When we say that we don't agree with the terminology of step, words are powerful.
Yes.
And they send signals. They're meant to communicate something. When you say step, it says that you are stepping on something to get to something else. You are using something as a tool, as a bridge, if you will, to get to something else. Well, that denotes, if I'm a stepfather, that means for me that I'm not the real thing. I'm not the thing that gave birth to you. So what I've learned is that to embrace my daughter as my daughter doesn't mean she has to call me father.
Right.
That's entirely up to me in terms of how I treat her. So when we talk about the step, and I understand you use the word step in our culture to sort of demark or sort of draw a line as to, well, how do you define your role or your relationship? Well, I'm my daughter's other father. right? Not step.
Right.
She has a biological father, and then she has another father. Now, quite frankly, in my daughter's case, she's had two fathers before me.
Right.
So what do you do with that? Am I the stepfather? You get what I'm saying? I'm the two-step father. Like, call me two-step, right?
Right.
You
No.
know, a drink and a two-step. Like, we're gonna have us a drink and a two-step on this cruise. Lord Jesus. Look, you get what I'm saying? Like, am I the two-step daddy? So at this particular point, I'm even further removed. So when I embraced her as my daughter, what it did was it broke down the barrier of how I viewed her, how I looked at her, and how I interacted with her. And so therefore, it enabled us to really come together much closer than probably we ever would have if we owned that whole idea. Well, she's not my daughter. That's your daughter. So you deal with that.
Right.
And so that never existed in our household.
Right. And also, we're not saying that when you take on that role, when you come into that role now as the bonus parent, that you're trying to replace the other parent, because that's not what you're doing, because Justin has a mother.
Yep. And it's clear.
And I'm his other mother. I'm Mommy Sheri.
That's what yep.
I'm his other mother. I'm not his biological mother, and I've never tried to take her place, but I stepped into the role as a supporting mother.
Yep.
And so that's been my role. And just like with Glenn, with Shantae, you know, she has a biological father, you know, and today she has a relationship with her biological father. But Glenn stepped in as her bonus father, and he filled that role as a father figure because he was the father figure in the household.
Yeah.
And so how can you be in the household with her and not function in that role?
Correct.
You know, and so he was the father in the home.
Correct.
Even though she had another father, but he wasn't replacing her biological father. You can never replace their biological parent, but you do still function in that same role if you're in that position. And I think that oftentimes people, you know, I think they lean on that step parent thing because they don't want the responsibility.
And that's really what it boils down. Guys, listen, we're going to have to get ready to go for today. We're going to pick this conversation when we get pick this conversation up when we get back from this cruise. And here's what I want to know from you. What are your struggles? What are your challenges? What are some questions that you would love to have answered? And I really want to turn this series into a Q&A series.
Right.
I really want to be able to sort of help give you real-time solutions. If you are interested in joining our community, MAPS, Marriages and Parenting Successfully, go to the link, www.thecrcoach.com. Secure yourself an opportunity to just kick it with us for about 15 minutes. It's a discovery session. Click that link on the website. Set that up so that we can get together with you, because I promise you, at the end of the day, you can move from broken to family to blended. Sheri and I are continuing to blend. Our children are grown. They're gone from the home. Thank you, Jesus. But we also now have grandchildren.
Right.
We will forever be blending, because
yes.
the analogy that I want to give you is if you think about a blender and putting something in it and you're blending it up, if you stop the blender and you let it sit there, what happens eventually, Sheri?
It congeals.
It does, but even before it does,
it starts breaking apart.
It starts breaking apart. So it
and
separates
it
before it
nasty.
congeals. And after a while, it begins to look like one big blob of mess, because it no longer has movement.
Right.
And I'm going to break that down as to how you can get movement, how important that is, and what you need to do in order to be able to make the adjustment, guys. Because at the end of the day, I promise you, we all need some help. Y'all be good.
Thanks again for joining us on our YouTube channel. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe and be sure to ring the bell so you get notifications. Thanks again.
We'll talk soon. Bon voyage. Y'all be good.